Well, if I could just say up front, we have some tech challenges today. So, there's another BCTV wasn't able to tape. I'm Zoom recording it and they'll edit it. Another commission has our owl, so I'm sorry. For those of you on Zoom, you're just going to be seeing me because I need to run some stuff from my computer too. But Tom is here and John is here, Steve is here, and we have Ray from the public who's here. So
will you be able to screen share, Sue? No.
I can screen share and they can all see you because you're projected up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's review the minutes of last meeting, October 7th. We start with the motion. Is there a second? Any comments or changes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion that we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Gary. Second from anyone?
Second.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, any comments on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, and I have none myself, and all in favor, please. That's the three, that's Sarah, John, and myself, and then Bonnie and Gary, what do you say?
Aye.
Okay.
Hi, see, I have my hand features up.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of your prerogatives to keep your videos off, but feel free to turn them on too if you're able to.
Mine is broken. Mine's broken. I'm sorry.
So it is.
Yeah, mine's is slugging, but I'm using the reaction feature with the hand raised, so
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it.
No,
Yep.
we can. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that was all five of us in favor of the minutes. Okay, on to announcements. I guess I'll say the first one. Sue's brought this up in the past. The Canal Street corridor plan, which has been around and being worked on by consultants the town hired for the last several months or so. There's a second public meeting. The first one was in August, maybe?
No, it was end of June.
Wow, end of June, yeah. The second public meeting will be in the select board meeting room on November 14th, 6 to 8 p.m. And if there's anything else to say about that or other announcements, Sue?
No, I hope you'll come out. They have some concepts for some streetscape improvements, some intersection improvements along Canal Street. And if you can't make it, that presentation will be posted online and I'll be sure to share it. I know some of you are unable to come. So
So
Will it be recorded too?
yes, it will be.
Okay.
will they be like wanting as much like space and time for feedback from members of the public who show up and comments and ideas? Is it going to be kind of structured the same as the first one? But
It's going to be probably, there's going to be lots of time for
yeah,
conversation, but yeah. There'll be a presentation, hopefully briefer and more to what are the concepts. Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, there was a lot of people in participation at the first one.
Yeah. We've also talked about having some boards again and people can comment.
Okay. I didn't put it as an agenda item, just really briefly with the downtown bicycle parking project. Work is being done on that. Inventories have happened, for the other times that Wyndham Regional Commission's surveys, inventories didn't capture. They were doing middle of the day on weekdays. I did a couple of, or 6 other dates and times than that. And, compiling some general kind of educational for our sake and reference material, general guidelines for what might, be understood to be best practices or good guidance for downtown bike parking. So I think next meeting we'll be able to run through that and get some familiarity. I don't know if there's anything to be said about the letter that was sent out. I forget if there was a follow-up email. It was sent out, right?
It was sent out.
Okay.
I think I think it was sent out to, Lindsay, do you remember how many people mentioned, was it 19 property owners or something?
Yeah, I feel like it was somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
On the letter, have you got any feedback yet?
not yet.
Yeah, do commissioners want to, get occasional updates when it seems warranted?
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to see what the results were.
The outcome of our letter. Yeah. Lindsay's amazing. Great. unless there's any other announcements, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Sue.
I have one for you. I sent the email around late this afternoon. The BDCC, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, has a public comment period for the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. The email that I sent you has a link to an online form where you can submit comments. They're due by December 4th.
All right. We've seen this next general agenda topic a couple or a few times, depending on how you look at it. This is about the responding to the state's legislature's statutory changes, which have implications upon our zoning and land use and whatnot in areas that are served by water and sewer. And so based on what we talked about and asked staff to do at the last meeting, I think they've come to us with some of those things answered and proposals. So
Yeah.
take it away, sir.
Sure. The first thing that I had hoped to be able to do at this meeting was to actually, you had asked to understand the water and sewer system a bit and understand where constraints are. Public Works has asked their consultant, it's the Dufresne Group, to do some mapping about that. And unfortunately, it's not completed yet. But what it will show us is where there are some, where the pressure drops and where they view that as being, that's where the constraint is. But, I think I had mentioned that it is essentially in the southern part of Old Guilford Road. But what I did do is, and you saw it in your backup material, is prepare some maps that show the areas of town that we know where we're not in sync with state statute, which is the 5 units per acre. So I thought we could run through those maps, and then I can kind of show you the one area that Public Works, feels there is the most constraint. So let me just share my screen. So this is this first area. Can everybody see Linden Street, West River Road? So this is Route 30 actually. And what you see on the right side of the screen with kind of the blue lines and the blue circles is some of the wells. And I think there's some utility structure. So you can see the water is coming out of that. There are a few parcels which are just north of the retreat farm. Some of them are actually conservation lands. Most of them have trails on them because they're owned by the retreat farm. But this small area in here, and I think the trapezoid that I drew on here is it's a little limited. It's probably the entire parcel. There might be some other constraints, but this is a small area where water and sewer is available, but that it's zoned rural residential.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
So why not the properties north of it that are rural residential and that I see blue lines through?
Because the sewer doesn't extend up.
Oh, okay. What color is this?
The sewer is the green. Yeah, you probably can't see it that well at that scale.
And
but the sewer goes here and then over to the wells, and that's as far north as it goes.
And is the red line about based off the 200 foot?
No, the red line was just my crude attempt to draw an area on the PDF, okay. With a PDF. Okay. The next area is sure where it goes. Did everybody see a changed screen? I want to make sure at home that you're seeing. This is the old.
It didn't change. It did not
change for you.
No, it hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. No.
How do I do this? I guess I have to do it this way.
You can also just share the screen itself.
Well, you have them in different windows, so you're gonna have to jump.
Now it's different. Now it's, yeah.
No, it's
good.
different. Okay. I hear what you're saying, John. Okay, so this is the big area, is Old Guilford Road, where you might see kind of where my cursor is. That's where the water and sewer line, it actually goes all the way into Guilford. So, this is an area, that from what the public works director has said, and this is where we need the mapping from the consultant, but there is a break somewhere in here, and that the further south that you go, there's not the capacity to handle water. And then there's this small little area over here. This is off of Route 5. It's Goldfinch Lane. The purple that you see around it is industrial zoning district. That's the exit 1 industrial park, but there's like a small street with some houses on there that does, the one on the corner has water and sewer. And those are zoned rural residential.
And just to remind me, if there's a capacity issue, the town is not obligated to follow the state
Correct.
for zoning.
That's correct. I don't know if you all heard, but John asked if there's a capacity issue, then this town is not required to follow the state statute. And that is true. That is one of the outs.
So with the little square going around maybe 2 parcels there, why is it going around the parcel that doesn't have the green sewer?
Probably my imprecise mapping, but I mean, I think it is worth, like, this is a little street here. It probably would be reasonable to extend it. So it could be something to think about putting them all in. Let's see. Sorry, we saw one. Oh. Now here's an area that actually we could exempt because this is actually the water treatment plant. And so this line, this is off of Sunset Lake Road. This line runs down the back of parcels and into Mountain Home Park. And it's simply here to bring the water down. We are not obligated then to connect these other parcels. It's just part of kind of the infrastructure delivery to West Brattleboro.
Why is there sewer there? Just because people work in that office at the water treatment?
It's a good question. I don't know why there's sewer there. You can ask that. Yeah, it's a little interesting. So that is one area though where water and sewer exists, but again, it's there because it's the infrastructure line to get into West Brattleboro. And then let's see, the last area. Yeah, last but not least is the area on Black Mountain Road. So down at the end here, where you see the change from the red to the kind of beige color, that's 91. And so you're going over Black Mountain Road. You have where my cursor is now, that's Buttonwood Estates, which is kind of a densely developed neighborhood. Then you have where you see this cul-de-sac here. That road doesn't really exist, but there had been a planned subdivision there. This is the area, one of the areas that SIT World Learning was asking about. On the other side of the road, there's water and sewer. There's Black Mountain Park, which is a mobile home park. There's a couple of homes coming up. And then if you look in this brown area where my cursor is, this was the other parcel that World Learning was asking about, and that does have water and sewer to it. There's some existing buildings there. So again, this is the other area that has water and sewer that we're not in compliance with. And Public Works has told me that there is capacity there. They're not aware of any constraints. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for until December to understand exactly where the capacity constraints are, but it is being worked on by the consultant.
Just another question in regards to capacity constraints. When water and sewer says there's no capacity constraints, I'm assuming that means that with the expected zoning, they would have the capacity available. Not that under the current current density, they have the capacity available, but they could project that with the allowable density, they would have the capacity available. Does that make sense as a question?
They, when they tell me there's capacity, they're saying, yes, we could service that. And
At the zoning that the state mandates.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what-
We, if a development happened there, we could serve there. Yeah. Are there any questions on the mapping?
So then what's the process for coming into compliance on this?
That's where we're going next. If you didn't hear that at home, Ray asked, what's the process for coming into compliance? So if there's no other questions on the mapping, I can move into that.
Yeah, I guess we'll see the mapping again with some more info, so.
It might be different because the consultant's doing it.
Mhm.
So I've laid out two options that we can look at for zoning of these parcels. One would be an upzoning, which means that we could take it from a rural residential zoning district and move it into a higher density district. That could be the residential neighborhood. It could be mixed use. It could be neighborhood center. And so, as you may recall, well, what I would say is the rural residential neighborhood or the rural residential zoning district is primarily a residential zoning district. So the residential neighborhood might be the closest in intent if we wanted to keep it to the intent of the town plan. It does not have a maximum density, the residential neighborhood zoning districts. So if this is the preferred option, then basically we would be allowing an exceedance of the 5 units per acre that the state statute requires. But that could be preferable because if you moved it into the residential neighborhood, there's a couple of the different PUDs that a development could take advantage of that is intended to kind of be compact development. We've removed the density standard in a lot of our zoning districts that have water and sewer because it's not really about the number of units per acre. It's more about the form and how the development is done. So we could look at the residential neighborhood. Let's see. Steve, do you want to speak to the next part of that? Because you've read that one. I'm sorry. I can't read it very well.
Sure. One potential benefit of doing the upzoning rather than relying on the state statute to take effect, rather than doing an overlay district as well, is that it could be done in a way that has language specifically preventing that density when not served by water and sewer. As we have definitely discussed that before, but that would basically allow for the potential for the development to basically come online, if you will, as soon as they are served, rather than being served by our system. If it were to extend somewhere new, let's say, those parcels would need to then be potentially upzoned at a later time, and that delay and uncertainty could potentially derail the projects that we would otherwise want to see. So the timeline could be more friendly to actually promoting development in those areas if that was preferable.
And then the other option is we could do an overlay district where you we have overlay districts now. We've got the missing middle, we've got the historic districts, and our flood hazard area is our overlays. And so basically you create this kind of overlay over the parcels that it would apply to. And in that area, you could give it, the density standard that the state is requiring of 5 units per acre. You could, we could have some other, requirements, other standards in that to get the kind of development that we were looking for. So that is another option that we could look at.
So for somebody that's novice, I mean, the overlay district sounds like the ability to customize zoning to a very specific, set of
Yeah.
requirements. Rather
Yeah.
than using it in the center, which is going to be used all over town, this could be, okay, we're going to have an overlay district for this.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, so those are the two options that we think are the best. We kind of ruled out keeping it at rural residential because it doesn't give a lot of doesn't give a lot of surety for developers. And maybe even Ray will speak to this and why there is an interest in seeing the zoning change to meet, because sometimes lenders and other partners, even though they know the statute says one thing, they want to see it hard and fast, to give them confidence to move forward. So I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, but
Which are the two options in staff recommendation?
I like the upzoning, but I think if you want to, if you're not comfortable, then the overlay is a good way to go. I think Steve would give your recommendation.
I would certainly favor the upzoning as well. I don't know that they have to be mutually exclusive. It could be even extra flexibility to have the overlay in case of additional situations where we have new capacity somewhere, and that would allow for some level of dense compact development before we are able to get to that through this process.
I'm sorry, I just asked which of the two that you recommend. Will you say that you would upzone it and then also create an overlay district that you would also apply?
I'd say if you're doing only one, then I would also recommend doing the upzoning. But it occurs to me that the overlay doesn't need to not happen just because the upzoning is happening. It could provide for some extra flexibility for edge cases that haven't happened yet.
One of the other things that we need to consider when we do this is in the rural residential, right now, 3 and 4 unit buildings are conditional uses, and those need to become permitted uses. Those are permitted uses in our upzoned residential neighborhood.
In an overlay district.
You could handle it in an overlay district.
Does staff want us to maybe bat this, maybe that's not the right word, but bat this around a bit amongst us, or to talk about the adoption process as well, to take it all together? I think it could be good to just bat this one around and see where you are all feeling. Other commissioners, do you have more questions or thoughts or persuasions?
I prefer the upzoning versus the overlay. I don't know, I'm not a fan of overlays in general. I guess it's sort of, I think I find them a little bit confusing, maybe sometimes, and I think maybe other people do too who look at land use regulations. So I prefer the upzoning.
I agree. That was Sarah.
And I definitely concur.
I'll throw a little wrench in the gears here. I think that, since we have this, town plan that we're operating under, which has all these land uses that Sue showed us as being, pretty rural, and geared more towards rural residential zoning, more so than residential neighborhood, and that, the state, with, commendable intentions, and it seems like we're generally in agreement with it, wants to see more housing and is kind of mildly usurping local control by, with this statute, that we should just essentially do the minimum that they're forcing us to do and not get, too extreme and do more. And then see, like, during the town plan process, because in 8 or 10 or 15 years, maybe the sentiments of the town people have changed, and maybe they want to see a bunch of what was previously that they wanted rural to be, dense residential neighborhoods. Maybe they've changed, but in the absence of seeing what this next town plan looks like, it still seems to me like the town people don't just want, housing wherever it can happen in a dense way.
So Tom, I'm sorry, once again, I'm not as knowledgeable as others are about this. Are you recommending a third option?
No, the overlay.
The overlay.
The overlay, because we could shape that to totally meet the law, which is already a great density increase over the existing, but not go so far as to have unlimited density.
But it also gives us the flexibility to change it and or eliminate it if we want changes. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess we should vote on it, right? Or do you want to maybe we'll hold that as a place marker until we talk about the adoption process? I wonder if that would influence anybody. Either
Sure,
way.
we can talk about adoption.
Okay.
In terms of adoption, there's kind of two ways that we could adopt it. So regular amendments are, go through a planning commission hearing process. The select board has to have 2 hearings. So it's a little bit longer. The benefit of that is if we wanted to go through the regular adoption process, we could bring forth a couple of the other amendments that we had talked about, bike parking and doing away with minimum parking standards, instead going to a maximum parking standard. The other option is that we could do it as an interim bylaw. That's how when we first got rid of density back in 2022, that's the way we did it because of the housing kind of crisis and because of wanting to be able to take advantage of some of the money that was out there to build additional apartments. The interim zoning process is much more streamlined. The planning commission passes it along to the select board, who holds a public hearing, and then they vote on it. And you basically show that you've studied the issue and that there's a reason. Usually it's health, safety, and welfare. In this case, it would be coming into compliance with state statute, which I think is, we could matches those goals. And then the interim bylaw is good for 2 years. There's an option for 1 year for the select board to be able to extend it while we worked on a more, a permanent amendment to it. So that's the other option, is to do it as interim. I think one of the benefits there is that, we get into state compliance quicker. So
those are the 2 processes.
those are the 2 processes. Yeah. So I think, with one, you're looking at maybe a 2 to 3 month process. And then the other one, maybe you're looking at a little over a month.
When you're talking about the temporary, is there a difference in impact for the 2 options for temporary? In other words, is it going to make a difference whether we propose propose an overlay, propose another alternative for temporary? Is it going to make it easier to do one or the other through a temporary, one of the other options?
They both can be done through, I think, with an overlay district, if we were just going to do the parcels that, we were kind of looking at, minus any constraints that we identify, I feel like that is maybe more in line with doing the overlay. An interim bylaw amendment would be more in line with an overlay, because then, we could go through the town plan and come up with, say, no, we want this to be RN in the next time. So.
Does one of those methods strike people, commissioners, a certain way over the other, or any questions about those to gain more clarity? Doing a permanent amendment, problem as permanent as any of our amendments are, but doing the full-fledged amendment process or a interim process.
I actually have a question. Since we're out of compliance with the state, I would think that we would want to do an interim amendment to get into compliance as rapidly as possible. So my question would be, is there a reason why we would do the interim?
Lawsuits aren't frequent in Vermont. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the state knew that it would take some time. I mean, most of the towns I've talked to are not into compliance with them yet, unless they had zoning going on at the time. So yeah, I mean, the benefit is we can bring those other amendments forward too, but I don't think we're at much risk. What would happen is if somebody came in, we'd have to say, no, you get 5 units per acre. So we would be in compliance with the state statute. It's just not appearing in our regulations. And
yeah, so really, it doesn't change the impact of the developer in the sense that state law, of course,
supersedes
ours. It simply is how our statutes filter. Okay.
Mhm.
I suppose to advocate for the non-interim, the permanent, whatever we would use to describe that. Given that we already are having to comply with statute regardless, in the way that Sue described, which I think would also, of course, include those uses that we would need to bring up to permitted use when we actually revise the language in the land use regulations. So if someone came and wanted a triplex or a quad in the rural residential and they had service, we would have to permit that given the statute. So really it's just a formatting thing that we would want to bring our actual zoning document into reflecting that change is already in effect. So it seems to me that the benefit of maybe taking a 2 to 3 month time frame versus a 1-ish month time frame, the benefit of being able to bring some of those other really transformative changes that would be coming, like the parking minimums being repealed, that seems like it could really be worth 1 extra month, I would say.
So I'm assuming when we do an interim, we're still going to have to do a permit, right? And so when we do the permit, we still could add those other amendments to the permit. Am I incorrect in that, or am I correct? You're correct.
You're correct.
So it just means extra work, frankly, to do the interim. And we get something out, we get the changes made more rapid. We still have to do the permit regardless, either way.
Yes.
I think those
We would have to do the permanent. Yeah.
And when we do the permit, we could make all the other transformational changes to the amendment we want to make.
Yeah, it's just what is the timeline for the permanent, because we are trying to write a new town plan, and yeah, do you push it off until after you've done the town plan, or do you?
Yeah, I get it.
Because you get 2 years with an interim bylaw.
And generally with the permanent amendments, we have more of like some public meetings sometimes.
Yeah.
And we have a
Yep.
public hearing here.
Yeah.
I
I mean, we're only required to have a public hearing,
Oh, yeah.
but we'd get it out there so people were aware.
I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter because state law takes precedence, but we would bring the statutes, the local statutes into compliance with just synchronicity with state law.
But then it also may do a bit more because like staff said, like, although you'll tell applicants that they can do 5 units per acre and they can do is it pronounced triplex or triplex? Okay. Triplexes and quadruplexes because state law allows it. But there's potential design and form and compact and clustering that we could do that all our other zoning districts or the RN and others feature and want and have this. Anyway, if we just meet the state statute, then maybe the design form that results would be in line with the goals.
I think we could probably make some additional changes beyond the state requirements.
Yeah.
If we got our own regulations, I think.
Yeah, whether it's upzone or overlay district. But is that something either way staff feels like they could produce pretty quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody else, I'm ready to go, certainly.
Well, does anyone have any ideas for vote? I mean, we have two binaries, I guess. You know, the upzone versus the overlay and the permanent versus the interim. Someone could just, you know, say B and 2, you know, or we could do 2 votes. Maybe we break it down.
Okay.
Maybe since the process one is most fresh in our minds, we'll hit that one. I'll make the motion. I move that we proceed down the path of making an interim bylaw to, I'll just remove the 2. Let's say period. You know what the topic's about. 10 seconds. Okay, any discussion? Debate?
Sorry, so you're saying that you're making a motion for an interim bylaw? Is that for upzoning or overlay?
I'll do the option 1 and option 2 first, and then whether we do it or not. Because I would have the same question.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that that would be the second vote that we take to decide that. But if you guys want to tackle the upzone versus overlay vote first, then I can throw that motion in the dustbin and we can do the upzone versus overlay.
No, I don't care. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, with voting this way, we can, then the second vote can be decide whether it's upzone or overlay.
Did someone give a second to his motion?
Yeah, John did.
Okay.
Okay. Someone yell out if there's more discussion, but I'm going to ask for hands. Well, some people have their videos muted. I'm going to ask for, I guess we have to do roll call. All those in favor, I will go around. John?
Yes.
John's in favor. Sarah? Well,
Yeah.
maybe, sorry, instead of saying all in favor, I should, since it's roll call, I should just say, what's your vote? We got John's, we got Sarah. Lindsay, how do you vote?
No.
Okay. And Gary?
Aye.
And Bonnie?
Yes.
Who's he?
Dan.
Oh, yeah, right. Dan? I'll vote yes. And back to you, Dan. You have more questions?
I think you might not be there.
Yeah.
We'll just,
I guess you can get back to us. It won't change anything, right?
Yeah.
It won't change the outcome. Put a placeholder of abstain, I suppose. Or just not present.
yeah.
This is more accurate. Okay, I can make the next motion too, unless someone else is burning to do it. I think you all know my preference, and votes have to be made in the affirmative. So I'm going to say I move that we proceed down the path of an overlay district to address this topic. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Gary seconds. Any discussion, debate, persuasion? Seeing, hearing none. I'll mix it up. Dan. Okay, we'll get back to you. Bonnie.
I think I do go along with the overlay. I'm still a little bit confused on its application, but it sounds good to me. Overlay sounds good to me.
Okay. And Gary.
I have to concur.
Lindsay.
No.
Sarah.
No.
Okay. John.
You know, Tom, I'm going to abstain because I do, the overlay feels more intuitive to me, but again, I'm not knowledgeable about this, so I think I'm just going to abstain from the vote. I don't think I had the knowledge to vote.
Select board appointed you to this position. Right?
Well, that doesn't mean they gave me the knowledge.
Okay. I'll try Dan again after my vote, and mine is yes in favor of the overlay. Dan, we really need you potentially for this one. Can you hear us?
So one question though, on the way we're handling this voting, if we go through and then we do the first option, which was the upzone, and that also gets another number of yes votes. Does that mean then the staff's going to do both?
I think we just really would have to twist your arm to vote.
Okay, I'll hold it that's the case.
But if it ends up being 3-3 or something, then I guess it just stays rural residential. But we can also we can re-vote. You know, you can do votes multiple times. Well, people can propose to re-vote and try it again.
So Lindsay and Sarah want the
Upzone.
I assume from that, yeah,
and Bonnie and Gary and you want
the overlay.
And
Not hearing from Dan.
not hearing from Dan, and I'm for the moment out of it.
Yeah. And I should have given the public an explicit moment to comment too during the discussion period of the motion. Did you want to say anything, right? Even though it's kind of an odd time to do so, not that that's anything on you.
I'll leave it to you to just decide. From the standpoint of me as a member of the public, it doesn't make that much of a difference. From the standpoint of the client I represent here in town, I think as long as we explain that the interim is a pathway to a permanent amendment, I don't think it's going to make a difference.
Since you do represent a client who actually has a real stake in the game, I would be very interested in your opinion as to whether you would prefer it be an overlay or be an upzone.
I think whichever one is going to give us the maximum flexibility in terms of the design would probably be the overlay.
Can everybody here at home?
Yes.
The
Yes.
question.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'd say the residential neighborhood, if we were to go down that path, it already has defined standards in the district. If we went the path of overlay, it could be looser than the residential neighborhood. It could be stricter, but either way, it would have to comply with state law. So it is more flexible, but potentially more powerful for your client, potentially less powerful for your client. That's the right way. Dan, last chance, I guess. I guess it's not the last chance, but for this first vote. John, do you want to stay as an abstainer or do you want to move somewhere else?
Do we?
Because currently we have 3-2 to.
So let me understand the deal here. So if it stays the way it does, then we go another month, right? Presumably with some other discussion, information, all the rest, and take another vote next month before we can actually make a recommendation.
I would not want to see that. I would like to come out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we still have time on the agenda. There can be further discussion to explain how an overlay works or what the benefits of upzoning it might be.
Yeah, because to be honest, I would vote probably overlay just so we don't stall. It's not good, but
I'll just say a little bit more about process, not that I'm trying to debate you or anything, just to add to it. Maybe that I think if the outcome of this vote is 3 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstaining, then we would say the motion fails because it didn't get 4. If it's 3-3, it fails as well. A tie fails, it means that it would fail. And then we'd say, well, unless we do a revote or another motion that we vote on, then it just falls back to what exists presently. Staff's proposals just aren't happening. But we could talk about it more. We could do another reframe vote.
So I'm assuming you're ready to move. Your client is ready to move, understanding that the state law takes precedence over all this. This is all well and good to listen to, but I would say we're relevant, but you're less relevant than you would be.
Well, you're relevant from the standpoint of reassuring the parties that we have interested in developing these parcels.
Yeah, money would probably
Yeah.
be interested, but you have some sort of statute.
That's what they're
back
looking for right now, which
Yeah.
either one of these options is going to provide in the short term.
here. Well, but not having an option probably would be more problematic.
Yes, if it's not going to be rezoned, or then if that's not an option, then we can't.
If you have to rely on state
Yeah.
law superseding.
I wouldn't in good, like, I would encourage you to make a decision, tonight. I think it's not, it's not good to not change the regulations and just leave it out there. I think developers want assurances. And so I think,
They'll lose interest pretty quickly if our.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what I'm really trying to get to is
Mhm.
I think it's valuable, even if it's not necessarily the best decision, to make a decision and move along and put everybody, I mean, this is a real life.
Yeah.
This is a real life project. It's not a hypothetical project.
Lindsay has
Yeah,
her hand.
Lindsay, what do you have to add?
Since I can't see who's in the room, who are you speaking with?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
My name's Ray.
Okay.
I'm a
And
Brattleboro resident. I live here downtown, but I also represent World Learning.
oh, okay.
And you were at the meeting like 2 or 3 months ago,
Mhm.
Yes.
presenting on their proposal.
So I'm not real comfortable talking about specific projects and making our decision
Yeah.
based on folks who have specific projects. I don't care for that.
Yeah, I think.
That's all I
I mean, I will say that they're not the only land that this applies to.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It kind of straddles the line sometimes, or feels like, oh, this is unethical, or but it's like, well, no, they're a member of the town and they can attend the meeting and advocate.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but as long as we're not like doing this as a favor to them, or like for
Yeah.
benefit.
In fact, I'll give you my exact thought
or
process.
compensation
was,
back to us.
I asked a person who has a real life situation.
Yeah.
What would happen if you have to rely on state law and have to go out to money
Yeah.
based on that? And they said, having specific knowledge of that, well, we would have more of a problem.
Right.
Now, I'm not doing that for them because at any moment, theoretically, any of the other properties that fall under this could come in and say, wow, I have a great deal too.
Yeah.
So I agree, by the way, with Lindsay, absolutely. But I want to be really clear. I'm not doing this for learning. I'm doing it because, well, again, I'm not doing anything at this point, but I think it's very wise to get a decision made and move on.
Oh, I'm sure if anybody had a vested interest, that would have been out in the open. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sue.
Any commissioners?
Yeah.
So I think anybody would have said they would recuse themselves, but I think having that open to the public gives a better purview and a perspective on the direction. Hearing that back from them does not negate, nor does it move, nor does it, make me feel any other different, because I'm just going to go by basically what is presented before me.
Okay, great.
Do you want to share the motion again because Dan is back in the
Right.
room?
Well, Dan, can you say, were you not able to listen and hear what was happening in the last 5 minutes or so, or were you able to, but just not?
I've been following along a little bit, I think. Is that?
Oh, okay. Well, so we voted on the making a permanent or making an official amendment process versus interim, and we were in favor of the interim. Then we moved on to upzoning, the 2 staff recommendations for the district of upzoning versus overlay. And if you need any questions or anything clarified about that, because maybe you missed it, I think you can feel free to ask. But should I share the
motion?
Yeah, the motion was that we proceed down the path of the overlay district for addressing this topic. And everyone else voted, well, except one person abstained. And it was 3 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstain. This is fine to share that. So I guess we're looking for your vote on
I'm sorry, I missed that. I think I shall abstain as well.
Okay, so the only thing that matters to me is you settle to me. Frankly.
Okay.
If there's nothing preventing you from moving for a vote on the other option as well, as you had mentioned.
We can try that out.
Yeah.
I move that we select option 1, which is to upzone. Upzone? Yeah, upzone.
All right. Is there a second for that?
Second. That's Lindsay.
Okay. John, how do you vote?
I abstain. Again, I only care, the only thing I care about, and I'm not trying to be silly or ridiculous, I just think it needs to be settled tonight because we need to get moving on it. I don't think either solution is necessarily bad. The worst thing is to just let this delay and delay and delay.
That might be what happens if people, certain people keep abstaining. Lindsay, how do you vote on?
Yes.
And Bonnie?
Sure, why not? It sounds fine.
And Gary?
Nay, I'm going to be the oddball.
And Sarah?
Sorry, what happened with the vote we just had?
The first one, it just didn't go anywhere because
Okay.
in order for an action to happen, it needs 4.
Oh, four guesses. Oh, okay. Thank you. And so now we're voting on yes.
We're basically just voting on the reverse.
Okay. Yes to the upzone.
Okay. And Dan?
I'll vote yes to upzone as well.
All right. And I'll vote no because I want the overlay. But that one passes. So we're upzoning it.
It's a good idea.
I suppose.
Now, I guess my question is, if Dan, you missed that's this particular topic, how are you voting yay on this one? I'm just trying to interrogate this to get an idea.
It's a good question, but yeah, but you did vote, but yeah, I guess Dan, you can feel for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. I actually I appreciate the folks who have been making their case, and I actually the other piece was which I did catch. I'm sorry, I've been a little bit in and out here. I'll just keep my vote. Thank you.
Keep your vote, you said? Okay.
Yeah, if you don't, if that's.
Yeah, that's your vote.
Yep.
Okay.
So
I guess we'll see draft language
So
for an interim.
we'll bring
upzoning.
draft language for an interim zoning in December.
Okay, great.
And you'll have another chance. You'll need to vote then. You'll actually see the language. You'll have seen the mapping and stuff. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I got it. Okay.
Okay, there's one more bullet point on this agenda item, but I don't think staff served anything up to us or gave us any prompts.
No, because I didn't know you wanted that. I thought they were your prompts. I thought you had ideas there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of do, but it's not necessarily anything that I would just say kind of off the cuff. I'd prepare something or run it by you beforehand. See what could potentially be added to the ordinance. So that'll be for a future, maybe the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. If we're done with that agenda item, let's move on to the monthly town plan, 2026 town plan agenda item.
Do you want to do the board?
Got a couple breakdowns of that.
Let's see.
These memos that correspond.
Hold on, I just want to bring up an image for you.
Okay, so can everyone see this on the screen? Okay, great. So We had our first run through of the engagement exercise relating to values and priorities as far as the various topics that broadly relate to the town plan. And everyone walked through that and gave feedback on the first and the second stage that we brought. And I think it's safe to say that there were some technical difficulties and hiccups with the way that it was flowing at that point. So we brought a few minor tweaks to recommend to that. But in addition to that, the word cloud that resulted from the feedback on the second step is available, and you can see that here on your screen.
I think that's great.
That yellow is a little hard to see. I apologize. But you can see the general size of words related to how frequently we got them.
So this could go right into the town plan. Right? I mean, it's graphic that we just put it in the town plan.
Yeah, it could be.
And we can continue to add data to the back end of this if we were to bring this particular exercise to more potentially larger groups. So it'd be interesting to see how that looks for different groups individually and how it might look different over time if we continue to add. We also have a chart for the first exercise, but by my omission, wasn't in here. So I will share that out with everyone after the meeting. But I think it won't be a surprise what was relatively high and low on the priorities given our conversations during that meeting.
I think it's a great idea, by the way, that you could take this word map from different groups and visually be able to compare them quickly as to what's important in terms of values between different groups.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah. So the general size of these is maybe a little bit hard to tell what exactly came in first, but it is safety was ahead of built environment and sustainability by a hair. Walkability and affordability also, as well as economic vitality, or not sure which second word is supposed to be connected to that. But those all were right up there near the top. There was actually quite a lot of variety in the words that people used, but there were only 33 words in total, which is sort of interesting as well, that everybody converged on the same general group of words, even though we did not give you an example word cloud, which may well have helped to.
What's the maximum number of words we could have? Were there 6 of us or 7 of us?
It's a good idea. It's a good.
There were 6.
Good thought.
9
Yeah.
times 6, 54.
I think it could be infinite, right? Because you didn't put a limit on the number of words.
There's 3 boxes.
There were 3 boxes.
3, but then you could do 5 priorities, so that you could have had 15 total.
Oh.
If they were all different, then yeah, 6 by 15 by whatever. So yeah, possibly hundreds of words could have come out of it, but it ended up being 33. So that's kind of interesting. I wonder if it would look that way, it'd be distributed that way with other kinds of groups or not. Don't know that that's relevant statistically to what we would actually want to learn, but
one of the things that I know you're going to get to it, but one of the things I want to make sure is that we get back to the planning commission and let them know what we heard in terms of improvements. Okay.
And so we can certainly also take more feedback as well, or hear what people think about what we are proposing to do to make tweaks to the process. And so it's on the second page of this memo is a brief list of a few potential ideas as to how to streamline this a little bit better, at least from my perspective of what feedback we got and just intuitively what seemed like it worked and what seemed like it was a little bit clunky. So the first one being that however this takes shape, we should just be sure that we really nail introducing this and giving proper background and instructions before letting people set off on their own to start doing it, so that they know what is being discussed and what we're asking them to do for us. Because I think we got away with it a little bit, being able to assume that people knew what we meant with a group of people who are devoted to planning. But with the general public, we'll need to make sure that we're really clear as to what we're asking them for. And so really related to that is the second bullet here, which is that adding in the next 10 years, or, technically, I guess it's sort of the next 8 years, but 10 is a nicer number. Telling them specifically, talking about Brattleboro, we're talking about this time frame. I think that was Sue's idea, and I think that is a very good idea because it helps ground this. I think most people are thinking fairly close future when they're thinking about these things, but in case someone was thinking 100 years or something, then this would help to clarify that. And then the third one is really just process, and mostly stemming from the fact that, for one, we had a lot of hiccups with trying to debrief between the two phases that we did, where we had you guys fill things out on paper, and then we took the paper back, and then we didn't think about it, but you needed the paper again. And so we had to figure out whose was what. And so we just won't do it that way, I think is the easy answer. And whether we debrief after the second one or after the third task that we didn't have, but are essentially proposing that this be the next step, that whether we debrief before step 3 or after step 3 is still sort of a point of discussion that could be had. I think there's pros and cons to either one, but essentially after those two that we had, more or less the same way, just making sure that we explain them with enough detail. We would then have the third stage being, okay, so here's what we do as a town in that area, in that topic. Give us your feedback on, should we be doing more of this? Should we be doing less of this? Are we right on the money? Keep doing exactly what we're doing, or do we need a radical change that is a totally different approach to that topic area? So we were thinking about it in terms of step 1 is the what questions, step 2 is the why questions, step 3 is the how questions. And I think that addresses some of the feedback that we were getting in the last meeting, which is sort of what's the point of this and how is this coming back around? Or at least that's how it seemed to me. But I would be interested in hearing if that feels that way to you folks. And the two final really minor things would be that we should be giving you guys physical things to actually dole out your points with, because asking you to do math on paper
That's a good idea.
is a little bit.
Also, you can change it, right? Without
Yeah.
having to
Yes.
step down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
So those things were other hiccups we didn't really anticipate, but yeah, having the physical things, I think will be,
Tokens or something.
yep,
Yeah, yeah.
I think it'll be more engaging as well.
Mhm.
And then also just making sure that we have a word bank of examples, and including but not limited to what you could use for that second step.
So I just want to clear with the commission on this. What I heard, and we've been back and forth a little bit on this, was we ought to use a stock pool of value words, and we pick from those value words. Now, again, if I'm wrong, I mean, I don't have any particular personal interest in this. Just let me know, and we'll give examples, or we'll let people come up with their own words or whatever. But what I heard was it would be more effective if, what I thought I heard, it would be more effective if we have a list of words and you choose from that list of words. And we give them enough words that, there's a ton of options for people to know the rest. Again, I have no personal preference. I'm just trying to be clear on.
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing that would be helpful too.
Yeah.
I personally, I agree that would be helpful. Instead of having writer's block, you have that. But also, I think then maybe if the minority of people come up with some words that weren't on there,
write your own writing.
Yeah, but then the chance that those will show in the graphic as being very prominent. Like the ones that are proposed are going to rise
Yeah,
up.
so maybe the right compromise is to give people a list of the selected words, and then they have the ability if they want to write in an option if they feel really strongly about something that I've seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
that's
our assumption was that we would just be giving an example list and people could still write whatever they want, but we also could, if it's the preference of the commission.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I keep going over this, probably to your frustration. I think there's a difference between the two. Let's give them a list of words, and if they want to write in a custom word, that's fine. But it's a little bit different than here's some examples. Now go write in the words that you write words that you want.
Yeah.
Because there was an understanding when we were going back and forth today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Our assumption, I believe, I don't want to speak for you, Sue, but certainly I was thinking that the suggestion we got last month was to give an example list and not limit the feedback that we were getting from folks. But it's true that it is a different result that you get. So depending on what is valued in what we're actually doing that for.
Well, we should go ahead I think Tom and I are on the same page. We should go ahead and ask the rest of the group.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, I don't have any personal agenda other than to just try and make sure that we're accurately representing the feedback we got.
Yeah, the commissioners want to clarify how they feel about that. The exercise when it goes out to the other groups or the public, having a big list of value words that can be selected from with or without write-ins, or just a few examples with or without write-ins.
Can I speak?
Please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I love this process. I've been involved in it, in this process through my church, and it's a very powerful process. I like the idea of having a list of value words. I think the list should be fairly good size, though, because you don't want to limit. I mean, we should be very creative, I think, with the value words, because then you'll give people an opportunity to really express, their feelings. But my concern is follow through once we. I love the idea of reaching out to different community places. I don't know, we're going to schools where I don't know where we're taking this, but then, what is the follow through going to look like? And who's going to be acting on these ideas that we come up with?
So, in terms of follow through, I mean, it's going to make its way into the town plan. So it's going to be that's going to be the major product. And then obviously, what comes out of the town plan is often directing staff work, targeting grants and whatnot. So, I mean, that's really, it's collecting it to guide us in writing the town plan.
Thank you, Sue.
I think Bonnie has a good point, though, and to extend. I mean, obviously, the priority here is to help create the town plan, but, and correct me, Bonnie, if I'm wrong, but I think I could also see when we do go out to these smaller groups, we owe them at least some sort of feedback, if nothing else, then, a short presentation that says, this is what we heard.
Yeah.
Right. And thank you very much.
Mm.
Yeah.
Is that what you were thinking, Bonnie? Something, like that along those?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Let's see where this is going to go for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing worse than to be part of one of these groups and then just left hanging.
Yeah. It's just in vain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Waste of time.
What the heck did they do with it?
And Bonnie, to build off what Sue said a bit about, even though it sounds like John's answer fully satisfied your question, but what Sue said about the town plan kind of being at least the most kind of direct result of this, I guess, is that at the end of the town plan is the implementation matrix, which addresses the goals, policies, and actions of each chapter, right? And we'll have 10 to 15, whatever thematic chapters like land use and municipal facilities and housing and education and whatnot. And then there's goals and policies and actions with each. And then I don't know if you all haven't, go to the end of the town plan, and each of those actions is, has a, one or more responsible parties in town government for implementing that. Now, to the degree that they're bound and obligated and have a immediate timeline to do that, no, but I mean, maybe actually it's the case of some of them more so than, or less so not than others.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, a pretty categorized and directed process that could very well be followed through by. You know. And a year or two ago, we reviewed the town plan implementation matrix at one of our organizational meetings, and for the actions that were relevant to the planning commission and planning services department, and staff gave us a update on, you know, what's since 2018 or whatever it was, what progress we've made, and then it kind of helped us. For example, the downtown bike parking was one of the actions.
Yeah, no, I think planning staff is sort of the ideal in terms of how to use the town plan effectively, right? Where
they can be its
they're
top champions.
At it. Yeah, well, they could, and not all the groups, obviously, as we both know, are going to be quite as thorough about using it, but that's reality. So the better we make it, the better chance we have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the explanation. Thank you.
For others who participated in it was just last month, this exercise, thoughts on, you know, the degree or at all of providing participants in this with example values? Anyone against that idea? Just want to not influence or?
No, it's a good idea. And what Bonnie said is correct. It should be a nice long list to give people ideas.
So the rest of the question I have for the rest of the planning commission is there anything we missed in terms of the feedback that you provided last month in terms of process that we should be including? I think Steve did a pretty good job of recapping everything and summarizing everything, but did we miss anything? Is there anything you want to add maybe now that you've had some time to think about it?
Oh, maybe inclusivity might be something you want to add in that equation.
So,
with inclusivity, it's very small. I think that should be a little broader so people know that that is part of something that we want people to be included in this particular plan. It's just a thought. Diversity is another one. I'm just looking on here to see if that's in there.
It will be interesting.
These are value words that you're suggesting?
These are values, ethics, morals, standards, everything that's included, that should be included with that.
So these would be value
in
words
that.
would be included.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Are we, well, and going along with that, then, are we going to, is there any thought of pre-selecting how answers? Right, because the what's are going to already be there, right? Housing and transportation, right? And then the whys are the values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like we're settling along having a pre-approved list of that, but the hows are just going to be totally open and free form.
That is also sort of on rails, if at least the way I was understanding it, where it's 4 choices more or less. I mean, technically you could have a 5th choice, but I just don't think it's productive, which would be stop doing anything in this regard. Just stop doing that whole area, which I don't think is realistic or possible in many cases. But otherwise, we have here's the status quo, and then we get people saying, I like that, but let's devote fewer resources to it, or let's make that more of a priority while doing the same thing. Let's stay exactly how we are, or let's reimagine it.
I missed that.
Are you suggesting, Tom, that like maybe one of the questions in that, so like we're showing like here's what the town's doing, you know, and then it's kind of a more or less whatever. Are you suggesting what else? And kind of allowing people to.
I skimmed through this because you guys sent in like an hour before the meeting, and I didn't see that the how is actually those 4 options is what you're proposing. Yeah. But I noticed the how, and I thought it was going to be like people, if they selected housing as their top choice, they would say like, you know, skyscrapers or tiny home villages, like that would be how they would answer the how category
And
with actual and that would create incredible diversity of answers.
but you understood where Steve was going.
I do, yeah, and I think that's
I think it's a
fine.
good idea.
We were wanting to ground
Yeah.
each step in what we're really asking about, and we have been centering the idea of making sure that we're asking people for feedback on things that they can reasonably be asked to discuss, because it can often be really frustrating for people that participate if they're asked to give random broad feedback on things that they don't feel they know anything about, and then we leave them hanging, like we said. So
No, I think
the
the four options are good. I think you did a good job.
we've taken a lot of care to make sure that we don't do that. And also, I meant to mention that Sarah, I don't think, was here for our last meeting, so there is still absolutely every opportunity to give us the feedback and have yours put into that word cloud and the chart as well. And Sue even could do it.
Let's do it, Sarah.
Anything else before we move on to the next item from anybody? Did you have more, Steve? I don't want to cut you off.
No, that is all. It seemed like we got what we should have gotten out of the comments, and
Yeah, no, I
seems
think
like
you did a
things
good
like
job of
that.
summarizing.
Yep.
Yeah, how many exercises do we have now that we've run through? That it seems like there'll be.
We did
just
the
a third.
SWOT. Was that? I think it was the second.
Oh.
Right? Did I miss one?
We found out how to do sticky notes on Zoom.
On Zoom, that was the
So,
SWOT.
yeah. And it's kind of a laugh, but it's a valuable tool for gathering input. I had someone who asked me the other day how to do it. So
Nice.
yeah.
Good. So the next part of this is one of the chapters that the Planning Commission will really be involved with is the land use chapter. And so that chapter is required to discuss existing land use and then also think about future land use. And so one of the activities recommended in the planning manual is to start thinking about what are the areas of town that we want to maintain, that we want to evolve, and that we want to transform. So what we did, we thought we'd start that conversation tonight. And, this might be something that we could also do with the public once it's a little refined by the Planning Commission. What we did is we sent out a map. I will share it. There were two maps, one that had groups and one that had clusters. And I can kind of, if you haven't had a chance to look at the map and you can't, quite place where it is in town, I can kind of explain where these different areas are and talk about the things in them that we want to maintain, which is to, the things that, what are the items in these areas that you want to preserve or strengthen without changing its condition very much. And then there's evolve, which is, areas that you see gradually changing over time that builds on an existing asset that maybe is in that area. And then transform is where you want to see, radical change to the character of this area. We purposely drew these areas so they don't correspond with the zoning, because the future land use map is not zoning. It is kind of the basis for zoning, but we really want to, take the zoning lens off of it and have you think about those areas, because maybe we need to make tweaks in our zoning, and that will come from the town plan. Steve, do you want to talk about the mapping? Because I think you did it a really interesting way to kind of come up. Yes.
Just to summarize, to make sure I understand. So you're going to show us areas. They're not going to correspond to zoning. You're going to ask us to basically say we want to maintain, we want to evolve, or we want to transform, with differences of work and obviously outcomes for those three. And then we'll discuss the answers, right? Or is that just the...
So, no, I mean, I think, what are the things in that district that you want to maintain? And it could be different amongst you. We might be talking about, I'm going to use downtown as an example. I would want to maintain the development, the building development pattern, right? I like that there's buildings that come to the street, to the sidewalk. I like the materials of the buildings being brick in a lot of downtown. Those are things I might want to maintain. I might want to evolve it so that there is better bicycle access or wider sidewalks. So it's actual kind of physical features.
So elements of each of these
Yes.
areas, you might have in a particular area, something for each one of those three: maintain, transform, and evolve.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to just be one of those
Could be a-
characteristics.
okay.
And it's really, I mean, I thought we could do it as a discussion. So
I think that'd be interesting.
yeah, that's the thought. And Steve did some neat mapping to kind of put the clusters together. So while I pull that up.
Let's start with provocative. Yeah.
Any other questions from commissioners? I think that the staff will explain a little bit more when the maps get pulled up more briefly before we launch into it.
Where did I put them now? Do you want to talk about your mapping?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, in the meantime, you've got two different maps. Like Sue said, one of them says clusters and one of them says groups. They are fundamentally the same in terms of the clusters, the groups rather, are several of the clusters put together.
Can you all see the maps? Yeah, okay.
The intent of that was that if one of them is too coarse, so to speak, and there's too much going on that's too different in those groups, that we'd rather pick apart on a more specific level, that we could instead be looking at the clusters one. Or if that one is just so specific or arbitrary feeling that it doesn't seem useful to be talking about those areas and those areas alone, that we could be looking at the more combined group map. But the way that we got to it was, like Sue said, not looking at the zoning specifically, because we wanted to put aside our preconceptions about the built form and what it ought to look like. And instead, what I did to get these results was just taking a layer of all of the buildings in town and then running an algorithm on that would show where there was a compact group of close enough neighbors without a gap of a certain distance that those clusters wouldn't actually be connected to each other any closer than that. So it would basically show where there are nodes of existing development. And then I also brought in just the actual topography as well in some of these cases to make sure that some of those connections that might look like they really are close by, but are, say, on the other side of a cliff, that wouldn't be a relevant actual neighborhood. So split some of those apart, but otherwise am relying on the just computer vision, so to speak, of what seems to be an actual distinct area of development. And so it seems the character is a little bit arbitrary, I guess, when you look at the clusters one. But for the groups, it does feel very much like what we ended up with was the light grays are areas that are a bit developed and also generally unserviced by town utilities, and are a bit further away from major centers, with the dark gray, of course, being our most rural, most far afield, least developed place. And then we have a few commercial corridors that are in group 2 that don't have a ton of residential, but tend to be very linear. And then we have 2 nodes that are in group 1 where there's very compact center-like development. And then group 3, of course, is the broadly residential area between those 2.
All right.
So what do you want to do?
Thanks. It was pretty fun when we saw these maps generated, actually,
Yeah.
and like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So let's
Dan's got a hand up.
go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, the map that has the groups on it, group 3 and group 4 has a sort of a salmon colored region in the
Yeah.
middle. What is that group?
That is also 2.
Group
I wanted
2.
to make sure I didn't cover it entirely with text, but you're right that that's not entirely.
I see. So it's color coded to group 2.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Canal Street commercial area generally. And
Right. So why is that? Can you explain that piece?
So it's more of a auto oriented linear commercial development pattern with definitely more off-street parking and different building form types than we would see in the areas right around it, which are generally more residential in character, really. And so that was the thinking behind that. That theme-wise, that cluster fits more with those other 2 areas that are similar in terms of being linear commercial development as you approach town.
So, what do you want? I mean, I have stuff to say, but I don't want to do
Dan, is that?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I get that. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. So, I thought, I mean, there might be places where we have to jump between the groups, but and the cluster map, but maybe we could start with this group map. And I mean, I would say let's start with group 6, which is the, kind of outer edges of town, to the west. And talk about, if you're familiar with those areas, let's start with maintain. I mean, what are things that you might want to maintain out there?
Well, I guess the quality of roads, because they could be pretty rugged. Um,
You want to maintain rugged roads?
no, I would like the rugged roads to be maintained in a better.
Maybe evolve, I think.
Evolving to a better level of service.
Yeah.
I'd say maintain the rural character.
How do you define the rural character out there?
Is that like Sunset Lake?
Yes.
area?
Mm-hmm.
Give me some options. What are you looking for?
Well, I always struggle with rural, right? Like we say,
Sure.
rural is low density.
Right.
I mean, I think these areas of town are probably the least, dense. Do you like, there's a lot of forested areas
Yeah.
up there. There's a lot of conservation land. There's some of the farms are there.
Definitely larger parcel sizes overall.
Yeah, large parcel sizes.
Sometimes not the case right up against the roads, but less so than some of the other areas that we grouped in 2 and 5.
So the little center of West Brad, is that in group 5?
That's in
Group 3.
That's in 1, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
it's
sorry.
confusing.
That's
it's in the
big pink area, the big dark pink.
the larger reddish pinkish area.
Okay. Yeah. So this is group 6 has like Sunset Lake Reservoir. I think it's got Round Mountain where you can hike.
Are they able to see your cursor?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Can you see my cursor?
So yeah, I mean this.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is Barrows Road and that corner of town where Camp W is. And this is, I believe, Melchin. And in these areas here on either side of this area that's colored differently for group 5, these are basically ridge lines that are very rugged. And I think all of this land in both of these pockets is essentially under conservation. And then we've also got Sunset Lake Road as well. And going up towards Dummerston here.
Yeah,
Dan,
I guess I would,
go,
I guess
sorry.
I would, I guess I would say the forested nature. At least I'm just thinking of sort of Sunset Lake area is a lot different than like, sort of
Mhm.
farm area.
Dan, did you have something, or is your hand up from up?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I mean, a big defining feature of that general area is the changing of slope in the road and the topography of the areas. It's very hilly, basically.
Mhm.
And, there are some significant, uh, let's say, agricultural usage as well as maple sugaring and so forth. But I guess I'm curious, why are that group 6, it borders the main roads, and you're basically talking about very agricultural land. Is that right? But group 2 and group 5 also could be considered very similar to some of the group 6 parcels. So I'm just curious how those got separated.
So group 5, I think, has more residential development than group 6, a little bit more along the roads and whatnot.
Yep.
Group 2 is actually kind of the Route 9 corridor as you go out of West Brattleboro Village, kind of it's, Dutton Farm Stand and Mountain Home is in there, and then there is kind of commercial development along the Route 9 corridor. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree, it's kind of a hilly area. There's hill farms.
Yeah. The actual boundary, if we had topography sort of overlaid on this, you'd see that the ridge line is basically the defining border between 6 and 2 there. Topography is really what's being used to define. I generally tried not to split up parcels, which is why you see a lot of straight lines in some of these places. But for that area, the parcels are so large and there's such a topographic change that we're really, for group 2, just looking at more low-lying areas that are on those main roads that are in basically the river valley or brook valley, although generally not by that point all in the floodplain, which is kind of the case at the border between 2 and 5 there, or 2 and the village rather.
We don't need to, talk about all these different groups or clusters and, go through all them, maintain, evolve, and transform. I think this is a part of town, at least for me, that, I don't see it. I would not want to see it transformed. And, I think Bonnie's point about the roads and stuff, I think is a good thing that could evolve. But I think it's okay if we just are maintaining areas too. And so why don't we move on to we could go with something easier like group 1, which we'll do kind of the downtown group 1. So actually it's kind of cluster 12 here. That might be a little bit easier to get things moving, but let's do it as cluster 12, which is really kind of the downtown area. Actually, it's the downtown up to about the courthouse, and then it's south to.
It's generally the same as the current UC, but with a little bit less in terms of the areas north of the courthouse, like you said, and then going down to Canal Street, essentially.
So with group 1, for me, I would say this is the window to Brattleboro for tourism. And I think there's parts of it which could be very appealing as is to tourists. We have a beautiful Old Main Street. On the other hand, there's parts where I think we need to, what was your most dramatic, transform?
Mm-hmm.
Where we need to transform, which has already started with the upgraded Amtrak train station. And then we need to transform the soon-to-be area of the old bridge and, island that it goes over. And even, not that we would necessarily get involved in any commercial, but the Whetstone group up there, right?
Mhm.
Which the guy just brought, which could be, a fabulous thing as people come in on the train.
Yep.
Right?
So kind of a transformation of the lower Main Street waterfront.
Whatever you call it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, call it a waterfront area, and I think that really needs to be transformed. Because that's the first view that a lot of people, certainly who are coming on the train, are going to get, and potentially others as well. And that could be heavily multi-use, right?
I would agree to downtown also, but I was also wondering which cluster is Putney Road? Is that
We'll get
14?
there. That's 14 and 1.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And a little bit before
Yeah, a little bit of 13.
before the bridge is 13 and technically 12, but we didn't cross the river at any point other than the meadows, which is kind of in the river.
Tom, did you have one?
Yeah, just hearing John's comment, it sounds good and I agree with it, but it makes me wonder, you characterize it as transform, but when I read the memo's description of what evolve is, it's saying, incremental change within it, whereas transform seems like the whole area should have a change.
So I have a little bit of an advantage because obviously I've talked to Sue a little bit about this beforehand, just to understand the terminology. The way I interpret transform is that we need to have an active plan in place to make that change. Evolve to me is we're going to let nature take its course to some extent. Where transform is we're going to go in there and we're going to
top down decision.
Well, yeah, we're going to put some money into it, if you want to think of that way. And not the whole area of Group 1,
right?
But the area specifically that I'm talking about, right? Somebody's going to have to put some
So a
money into
transformative
the
action will happen
and the island and all
cluster
the
12.
else. That's the only reason I said what I said.
So in that
Take it, Lindsay.
line of thinking, would you think about maintain sort of as a stop nature from taking its course in a way, if as you were saying it, if you wanted to make sure that there wasn't change?
Limited.
Yes, the
Protect and
third
conserve what's there.
option, which is maintain, to me is that we try to the extent possible to keep it status. Right?
Let's go with Lindsay and then Sarah afterwards.
This is very challenging.
Is it the mapping?
I guess it's the mapping, but not really. It's just, these are really like big questions. And as far as like speaking publicly, it exposes a person's feelings about places and how they perceive them to be, which could be entirely different from somebody else's perception of a place. So I guess it makes like, I don't know that I want to say anything about certain places because I don't want to offend somebody. Unlike the other exercises we've done, this feels like much more like putting myself out on a limb sort of to say something. So that's just more a comment about the process. I don't think I really have
I'll
anything
tell you
to say
something.
about
Personally,
cluster
I
12.
appreciate your
right?
honesty in that regard.
No, I do. Yeah.
Would you like to see it written down, or the participation through submitting something?
Well, I do think it's helpful for people to speak out loud about things and hear what other people have to say. It's just I don't know, it can be a little uncomfortable. I mean, I can think of, some things with cluster 12, for example, that I don't think would be particularly controversial. Like, I would like to see the sidewalks evolve into, places where people could walk safely from the train station and get into the museum. I don't imagine many people would find that particularly controversial if they've ever walked along and hugged that wall to try and get from back there. But
Mhm.
other things, no.
That's interesting because I mean, I absolutely respect what Lindsay is saying. On the other hand, you know, and I'm probably a great example of this, I have a completely, let me say completely different perspective. I have a different perspective on it, which is that we need to drive these differences in vision out so that we can talk about them and hopefully come to some consensus on what we want the town to look like. Now, I don't know if that was your intent. But that's certainly what I'm using this as an exercise for. I mean, I'm well aware that when I say I want this to be the tourist window, some people are going to cringe. You know? But I'm aware of that, and I'm saying it deliberately because that's my opinion. Right now, it doesn't mean obviously that I'm right, and it certainly doesn't mean that I'm going to somehow win. But I think it's worth saying.
I think it's also challenging when you haven't lived in a place as long as some other people to, like, I don't know, I've only lived here for 4 years. I mean, obviously I'm involved because I'm on the planning commission and stuff, but I don't, I don't know. Some of this makes me feel like maybe I don't know enough to say what, like, where I grew up, even though I haven't lived there in years, I would still feel very confident in speaking about it because that's where I grew up. But it's a little bit different when you move someplace.
Would it help if we ever, I don't know if we would return to this another time, but if we were to have some element where we could show certain areas, like as a lookbook of sorts, or I don't know what the copyright implications are of streaming ourselves going through Google Street View. We could make sure that that wouldn't be breaking
I
any.
think that actually probably would be helpful. Like if you were like walking down, like what do you see here that you like want to maintain, evolve, or transform? Maybe that would be helpful. It's also helpful just from the perspective of like, for example, cluster 4, like I'm not familiar with that area. It was interesting to hear other people talk about it, but I couldn't have spoken intelligently about it. But if you showed me a picture of it, and things that were there, then I could speak about the qualities that I saw in the pictures, even if I had never visited the area.
This is good feedback. I mean, because another way to do this is walking tours and walking around and, you know, having those conversations, you know, an audit or whatever. So no, it's good. I mean, I took this activity from a state planning manual and I was like, I understand that sometimes I sit in my office and like you know, I fixate on this stuff and I know the town really well and I have my ideas of what should change. So when I first asked, is it the mapping? Because it's like maybe people don't know parts of town so well, and that's okay too. But
So cluster 13 ends at the West River. Is that the north boundary of cluster 13?
yes.
So I'm just going to keep talking and tell me obviously you're telling.
Well, hold
Should
on,
we get
because I
there?
mean, they took their hands down, but they were up for a while, so I don't know if they put them down out of frustration or something.
Yeah.
But Sarah and Bonnie, feel free to not say anything if you change your minds, but
I was just gonna make a comment, but I'm happy to,
or
if we're gonna sort of put pause on the mapping thing, then I can save it for that.
oh no, please.
Oh, no.
I guess I don't for cluster 12, right? But no. I don't know if this would be evolve or transform, and I don't know, we probably can't do anything about it, but the semis that go through downtown, I would love to do away with them. It just does not make the pedestrian level of the downtown very friendly or enjoyable, especially if you're trying to sit out whatever, in front of Amy's or Joe's. Yeah. A little close for comfort. Yeah.
Bonnie.
Yeah, I'm actually saying the same thing that Sarah is saying. And I, at one point, a couple years ago, I figured out a route of mapping how we can keep the semis off of basically the center, the main street. And I think it's just an awful experience in general to have to, sit outside in front of Amy's. So I think what would be the category for that?
I think it's kind of a transform.
A transform. Yeah, it would be a transforming. And I really do believe it can be done. It's just a matter of, dealing with, I mean, most of those or a lot of those are Sursasamo. And I think we could put restrictions on the main street there.
Gary, your hand was up next.
I have to agree, probably revisit this because there's a lot of people who've been in this town longer than a lot of people have, and maybe a better mapping on that because there's a lot of history, a lot of historical value also downtown that was mentioned, and there's a lot of growth that's coming, a lot of buildings that are coming down. I think a better purview of the map on these areas and what they were represented as back then as compared to now, trying to rebuild these areas and to make them more not just accessible but more vibrant in our town might be something that we can touch upon. Maybe, I don't know, Steve or Sue can send maps of historical value to certain portions of the town to give a little bit more insight in those areas like Cluster 4 and stuff and these other areas. I've been here now since 2008, so I pretty much know the areas, and I have to agree with Lindsay. There's a lot of people who have just came into the town, don't really know the value to a lot of people, what these areas mean and how historically and a lot of memories. So that being said, there's something that we might want to consider taking into the equation moving forward with certain areas and not devaluing them. Thank you.
Contribute a thought, which isn't about cluster 12, but just the whole thing. Roads are very central to how we look at maps conventionally nowadays, maybe always, since maps have existed with civilization. But this map could have the water features shown instead of the roads, or it could have the forest versus the amount of plant coverage shown.
Even markers of some sort that says, okay, this is where.
Yeah, or other features.
Yeah,
but what we see here is the boundaries of the town and roads. I mean, I do see the West River too, but although not where it expands into it's called the Retreat Meadows. So, I mean, the roads help, and that's the way we're familiar looking at maps. And if you do it a different way, then people may be asking even more questions about where is this again and what's that? But I think it could be worth exploring that a bit to prime people to go into it with a different set of values or prompts or assumptions or like the comments we heard. Maybe it's just correlation or we're a lot about roads. But if we saw a map that had water features and forest, maybe some comments that people talk about would be more about trails and boating and sightseeing and wildlife.
Yeah, you could actually do a lot with that cluster 12, probably with some sort of boat ramps. Yeah, maybe a boat ramps.
I mean, you didn't talk about waterfront there, but
yeah.
Okay, it's all good feedback.
So, cluster 13 is sort of a pet peeve of mine. I think it is a beautiful area to travel through, and I would love to see it actually transform to what we call neighborhood center, which in my mind is primarily residential with small local retail, so eateries, stuff like that.
We're talking about Western Ave between downtown.
Cluster 13 to me is not 5 north to the west.
Yeah, it has a few little pieces that are a bit of this was one of the closest edge cases that I came across, so it feels like it's a little bit out of sorts. But yes, it's a piece of Route 9. where I believe is
For
around
me, it's a
where you
rehash of
live.
discussion we had when the guys came in.
Yeah, it's that area. That's what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it is
Yeah.
a neighborhood center. I
Mhm.
mean, it could be a beautiful neighborhood center, given the terrain and the water and everything, but it has to be transformed. That's really one. It's obviously, we've proven it's not going to evolve.
Mhm.
For reference for folks to make sure that we're all aware of where we're talking in town as well. Part of it is also the segment of Route 30 that comes before the highway, as well as the more suburban, more northern part of the peninsula there along Putney Road. So like Harris and Wintasset streets. And then we've also got the Tree Streets and Williams and whatnot. 250 Burridge is the southernmost
Putney Road
parcel
up to the
there.
west is really.
You're talking about. Well, given, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if the way we commented on things is the way I see is some of the comments were about specific features within some of the districts or groups,
Mhm.
and then some of the comments were just about kind of just the overall cluster or group as a whole. Do you think that those comments, like equally, those comments should be received? Or do you kind of want more higher level? Like, because for cluster 12, maybe I would say evolve in the sense that, and my example or more concrete thing would be like, I think that should remain the downtown commercial activity hub heart of Brattleboro with some changes, some improvements. And I'm not even going to get into what those specifics are. I'm not going to focus on a specific feature, but just like, yeah. So is that because a lot of things are going to come from this. And if people just start listing all these specifics and little projects and stuff all over here, is that going to be a big chaotic mess?
No, I mean, I kind of wanted the
Okay.
specifics
Oh, great.
because that,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's
okay,
fine.
great. You want it to remain downtown, but change. Like, how do you want it to
Yeah,
change?
that's
Do you
your
want
general,
more
right.
high-rise housing there? Do you want better sidewalks, wider sidewalks, no cars on streets? What is it that's, I think, the intent of what I was trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
Dan did have his hand up.
Oh,
I don't know
please,
if you
Dan.
wanna- Unless maybe.
Yeah, that's actually, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more, Sue, on what you're actually trying to get out of this. I'm a little bit lost as to what, but it sounds like you want someone's pie in the sky version as well as the sort of a reality check of where they see these places. I know a lot of these areas.
Mhm.
I could get a lot of feedback. It would take way too long.
Right. We don't have the time tonight for sure.
Yeah, of course. But that's kind of, you want the highlights. You want, pie in the sky versus reality check, I guess. Is that kind of what you're going for?
I wouldn't say I'm looking for pie in the sky. I mean, I might have said I want a skyscraper of residential, just to give an example. But like, yeah, if you're talking downtown, no, you think that some of the parking lots should be made into housing development. Like, I don't consider that pie in the sky, but it is a specific change that you would want to see.
Sure.
Or, if you're looking at cluster 1, right? It's mostly industrial up there. Maybe you don't want it to be industrial. Maybe you think we need more room for housing, and you would say that. I guess I'm not sure, as specific as possible, but not like, totally out of the realm. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Dan.
No, that works. Yeah. So I guess one way we could go about that, it seems you have a numbering system to these clusters and the groups. Shouldn't we just go through them in order? It seems like, like you just mentioned, cluster 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling though,
or you just want to go willy-nilly, jumping around. I don't know.
well, it's
Well, as far as
7:55.
local
I mean, I think
Yeah.
we've gotten some feedback on the mapping, and so I think we can bring it back with something different. I don't.
I will tell you feedback. I think it was a very interesting exercise. It obviously needs some process refinement, but you got some feedback on it. But for me personally, it was a very interesting exercise. And again, I look to generate sometimes disagreement because you need to reach a consensus through that process of discussing it. So I think it was a great effort. Absolutely great effort.
Let's quickly say that potentially this could also be kind of an interactive activity where there's a whole bunch of like, green maintain buttons and blue evolve and red transform, and you can write a specific on it and then you plop it on the cluster.
Yeah, it's actually
But or multiples, or maybe everybody just gets one per cluster.
At the risk of overpromising staff ability over a month, I do think it would be possible to take this, make it more interactive, actually on the computer, so that you can see zooming into things, possibly with the ability to drop pins with comments, possibly with photos attached to certain things. Those are all definitely possible in general. Hopefully within the time frame when we bring this back, I think we could do that. I definitely see where it would be a lot more intuitive that way.
A couple of quick suggestions. One is I would not necessarily start at 16 and go to 1. I would deliberately pick one of the more provocative ones because you want to create interest and generate conversation. The ones that have most talked about it.
Yeah.
And the second thing is when, somebody says, well, I want to move the lumber trucks off of Main Street. And John Kahlur says, I see this as the tourist window. You could ask John Kahlur, well, what do you mean by making it the tourist window? Give me some specifics so that you could lower John's sort of pie in the sky view of it to specific details. What does that mean when you say you want to make it a tourist window? Well, you want to work on the bridge and you want to work on the island. And okay, now we're getting to specifics. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. You could drive your questions to make it all a level where you could actually take action.
Okay. Unless anyone has something else burning to say on this agenda item, we're a couple minutes from our general ending time. So I'll do the required public comment period or official public comment period. Public should have commented throughout the meeting, of course. Hearing, seeing none. It's over. And we finished our business, so meeting's adjourned. Sorry.
Thanks everybody. I'm sorry for the tech issues.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, you too.
Great job, team.